Good evening. Welcome to this evening's live stream. Now, we haven't got a guest tonight. We've got a little gap in our schedule of people coming on, but I've got a few things to talk about, and it'll be good to answer some questions in the comments and interact a bit with the comments as well. So do suggest topics, ask questions or whatever. We can come to those as we go through the course of the next hour. A couple of things to mention just coming up soon. On Friday evening, we're in Stornoway. I say we, that's 4 of us are going over. We're having a meeting in the County Hotel in Stornoway at 7 p.m. Jonathan McKeever, our man in Stornoway, will be there as well. So that's Stornoway, 7 p.m. on Friday. And then 7 p.m. on Saturday, we're going to be in Inverness. Just a sort of social gathering and opportunity to meet people. And that will be in the Best Western Inverness Palace Hotel. Again, 7 till 8:30 p.m. We haven't been to Inverness for a long time, so it'll be good to see some people we've seen before, and maybe see some new faces there as well. So I hope to see you at either of those events. Now, this evening, I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about my new book, my only book, Christians in Politics. That some of you, if you're at the conference, will have got a copy. If you remember the family party, there'll be a copy on its way to you before too long. Well, I thought I'd talk about some of the issues in the book and see what people have got to say. Hello, Bruce, in the comments. Right. So why did I write this book? Well, it started off as a series of blog posts. I was doing one a week about various issues to do with Christianity and politics. Eventually, I stopped posting them on Facebook, but I kept writing them. I kept thinking of more and more things to write about. So eventually, it got to the length where I thought the best way to publish this is as a book. So that's what I've done. It's a short book. It's only about 80 pages, I think. The chapters are very short. It's not sort of padded out with lots of stories and illustrations. It just gets to the point with each chapter and then move on to the next one. So what inspired me to write it, a big part of it, was talking to people about Christianity and politics and hearing the things that people said. And I realized I was tending to hear the same things from one person after another. That was very interesting. I'd often answer one person, and then, a couple of weeks later, I'd find myself in a similar conversation and giving the same answer to someone else. So eventually I thought, right, but if this is going to be more efficient, if we just answer some of these questions in a book form. The other thing as well, if someone's got a very different conception, understanding of how to engage with politics, if we just talk about one aspect, well, that's not really enough. You need to deal with a lot of them all at the same time for a person maybe to see that there is an alternative way of looking at things. So I thought if I could deal with things all at once in my book, then that would be helpful. So that is what I did. So I'll talk through a few things that I'll flip through and pick some chapters at random and just share some of the content. I mean, the first chapter talks about why do we get involved in politics? What's it all about? Well, it's basically about trying to improve people's lives within the society. And if as Christians we believe we've got some wisdom from God, if you like, that's going to help that process, that's going to help people to lead better, more fulfilling lives, then it's our duty to be sharing that within the political process, which is quite straightforward. The second chapter was about reordering priorities. And the point we're trying to make there is that if you just watch the news, if you watch the BBC News for 5 years, watch the 6 o'clock news or whatever every day, then a lot of the issues that the family party focuses on, you will virtually never hear a word about them. They just won't get a mention. And also, if you watch mainstream political life as well, there's a lot of really important issues that will virtually never be mentioned in some mainstream political debate. So what tends to happen is people watch the television, they watch the political goings on, and Christians take on the priorities of the mainstream, if you like. So the things that they're talking about most in the parliament, the things that they're talking about most in the media, the tendency is for Christians to think, oh, they must be the most important issues. And these other issues that are actually really crucial, Christians tend to think, oh, they're not really proper political issues. Because if they were, those politicians would be talking about them all the time. So part of our challenge as the family party is to encourage people in general, but including Christians, to try and reassess their priorities. Just because the news and the political narrative is dominated by certain issues doesn't mean that they're the most important issues, particularly from, if you like, from God's point of view. They might be quite different. There might be different priorities. So we encourage Christians to reassess their priorities. So there's a chapter on that. There's another, hello, Mary. I've read the book. Excellent. That's good. Thank you. If you wanted to get the book, actually, I'll put a comment on now that there's a link there. If you want to get a copy, that's on Facebook and Twitter. I say don't buy it on Amazon, by the way. It is on Amazon. But Amazon have bumped the price up. It's supposed to be $7.99, which is very reasonable. But they bumped it up to something like £12.53. I don't know if they do that with all new books because they think there might be a bit of a flurry of activity when a book's new. But I'm really surprised. I would have thought they would be undercutting the recommended retail price, but they've overshot. So definitely don't buy it from Amazon. But the website I've put there will provide it. Let's have a look. Comment from Alejandro. To a degree, you're motivated in politics by your Christianity. Do you think there's a danger by the leader being openly Christian that the party can be dismissed as nutters? Well, there's always people who will try to dismiss a party such as this as nutters. Now, my attitude to my faith in politics is I don't really talk about it very much. If I'm asked about it, I'll talk about it very definitely. And where it really comes into it as part of an argument, or if I'm talking about what Christians believe in terms of defending their freedom of speech or whatever, I'll talk about that. But the actual Christian moral teaching, specifically Christian moral teaching, I don't usually talk about that as Christian. I argue for it in terms of the consequences and how things work out best for society. And so usually I don't talk about faith explicitly. And within the family party, we've got Muslims, we've got at least one Buddhist, we've got at least one Baha'i person of the Baha'i faith, probably all sorts of others as well. So we've got a range of and atheists as well, a range of religious perspectives within the party, and that's the way we want it. So we're not a Christian party. I'll talk about that in a minute, maybe. Right, we'll be dismissed as nutters. Now there are some people who like to think that as soon as they've worked out that your beliefs might have a religious element, that's a reason to just dismiss them. You can ignore someone if they've got some religious foundation for their beliefs. Now, I think we've just got to oppose that. That's just completely wrong. Everyone can bring their values into the political sphere, no matter where they come from. However, if you want to convince other people of them, then you need to present arguments in terms of what's going to help people to flourish, what's going to protect people from harm. And they're the arguments we put forward as the Scottish Family Party. Now that's an interesting issue. I mean, what I would talk about as like Christian moral values, they are shared pretty broadly across other religions as well. They're also shared by a lot of people of sort of socially conservative views who are not religious. Now, again, the thing about that from a Christian point of view, why is that? I think the reason is that we've got a God-given conscience, and so planted within us is this ability to discern moral truth, if you like. So if you put forward moral truth, there will be something within people that it appeals to, and their response to it will tend to be, yeah, I feel that as well. That's what my conscience is saying as well. Now, some people might ignore their conscience, or they might suppress it, or you might prick their conscience and they react by getting really angry with you because they don't like their conscience being pricked. But yeah, I think everyone has this deep down. They have a conscience that can be appealed to with the truth, with the moral truth. Yeah. Right, 100. All right, thank you. Right, Bruce. Bruce has normally got some challenging questions. Let's see. Truthfully, how can this party challenge the Scottish government? How do you expect this party's obvious conflation of Christianity to be literally palatable to an atheist nation? Right, first of all, let's look at that assertion of an atheist nation. As far as I'm aware, the non-religious in Scotland have maybe just made it over 50%. Is that right? Or are we waiting for the next census? Maybe at the next census, it's expected that the non-religious will have just made it over 50%. Okay, so if we're only representing 45%, I don't think there's really a problem there. is there? Anyway, the idea of politics, particularly with the electoral system at Holyrood, is that smaller groups, minority groups, can get representation in that, which is good. Be even better if it was proper proportional representation, but it does give the opportunity for minority groups to be represented. Now, you say conflation of Christianity. Well, I've just explained that the values of the family party are socially conservative values that are shared by people across religions and a good proportion of non-religious people as well. I'm not sure what your point is when I say we've got Muslim members and one of the Baha'i faith. There are not many people of the Baha'i faith. I mean, I don't know how many people of the Baha'i faith are in the SNP, for example. But anyway, right, Bruce continues. Not only that, increasingly small fraction of the population who are Christians are even more conflicted among themselves. Okay, now that's a good point. That's one of the reasons why I think it's a bad idea to have a Christian party. There's lots of other reasons as well. But one of them is that the Christian church can hardly ever speak on one voice about anything. There's always different factions. So, for example, I mean, you find me, a bishop in the Scottish Episcopal Church who will say, oh, yes, Scottish Family Party, yes, they really represent Christian values. I mean, they would be completely opposed. They'd probably be more saying, oh, you should, Lib Dems, that's really what the embodiment of true Christianity, not all this pro-life stuff. God's not interested in that. It's, it's the planet and equality and whatever. So, yeah, but there is always division among Christians. When I'm watching I don't watch television anymore, but in the days when I did, I would always think whenever I saw a shot go to someone in a dog collar with a stained glass window in the background, I'd always think what's going to happen next is this person is going to deny some fundamental teachings of the Christian church. And that was always the way. So, yeah, there's great divisions within the church, but there are still a large minority of people who do hold to traditional moral values. So they're the people we want to represent. As partly we want to represent those people, partly we want to persuade other people who currently haven't really heard the argument for the traditional moral positions in a lot of areas. Political party or pressure group? Well, political party, we stand for elections, and that's our main goal. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? If we were a pressure group, I'd be here saying, write to your MSP, write to your MSP about this, fill in a consultation, write to your MSP again, write to your MP, and all that sort of thing. That's what pressure groups do. But we're saying, get involved, support the party, let's build the party up. We need candidates for the council elections next time, and we aim for the elections in the future. What did I think of Boris's Peppa Pig speech? What do you think of how he was dealing with the boat migrants? Now, that's okay. We'll take a little diversion for a moment. I will talk about this. I only heard the highlights, if you like, of the Peppa Pig speech. Basically, the bit where the people said it had gone wrong. I mean, he clearly did lose his place in his notes, and it did sound a bit bizarre. I try not to jump to too many conclusions from that. I mean, if that became a bit routine, I'd be quite concerned. So I think that's embarrassing for Boris Johnson. And okay, opposition parties will try and use that to suggest that he's incompetent. Okay, that's going to happen. I'm not sure how fair that is. So I wouldn't draw any conclusions from that as a one-off incident. The boat migrants. Now that's another interesting issue. I mean, my view on that is that these people are not coming from dangerous countries. They're choosing to come to Britain and expose themselves to danger in order to get a better life in some way, because there's some aspect of life in Britain they think is going to be easier or more beneficial than life in France. Basically, we're talking about France. So are they asylum seekers? Well, possibly some of them, but it's really hard to say because a lot of them throw away their documentation. If you're seeking asylum, you're supposed to do that in the first country you get to. When these people arrive here, the human rights conventions are very strict. So it seems virtually impossible to actually send people back where they came from. It's really difficult to know what to do with people. Then you've got these children coming over as well. I mean, I think that's just the height of irresponsibility and neglect for people to send children over like that. I mean, what they're thinking, I do not know. I mean, some people are saying we should withdraw from some of the European Court of Human Rights so that this issue can be dealt with more firmly. Like in Australia, I mean, they routinely intercept boats, tow them back to where they came from, and say, no, you can't come in. But what this comes down to is Britain has an immigration policy, and it says people are allowed into the country under these conditions. So as a democracy, Britain has decided the conditions that people must fulfill in order to enter the country and to stay for whatever length of time. And that's legal. That's the law. So if people are trying to bypass the law and effectively come into the country illegally, then I think it's quite important that that doesn't work one way or another. If people think you can bypass the law, then you've got a problem. And in terms of rates of immigration, I think I won't go into detail about this, but there are good reasons to think without border restrictions, immigration around the world would be absolutely phenomenal. It would be massive. I mean, some countries would almost empty, and other countries would be literally. I mean, people say Britain's overcrowded. Okay, yeah, maybe it is in some ways, but we're not talking that. We're talking like absolutely swamped by, doubling population, that sort of thing. So the border controls, I think, are very important, and the government sets the rules, and I think they need to be able to enforce them one way or another. Now, another issue that's been spoken about with regard to the migrant issue is security, obviously in the light of some recent events, and I think that's very significant. There's the question of Islam, Islamic radicalization. That's one side, but I think another side that's really important is if you get huge numbers of young men coming into a country where they don't speak the language particularly well, they're starting right at the bottom in careers or whatever else. I mean, their chance of basically marrying, starting a family, finding a girlfriend, well, they're maybe not in pole position in that position. So what tends to happen to large numbers of young men who are basically frustrated? I mean, they can't flourish in the way that they would like to at that stage of life because they've decided to come into sort of an alien culture where it's quite difficult for them. I think it's inevitable that there are going to be problems emerging from that, and I think that's what happens. So I think that's an issue as well, needs to be looked at very carefully. Anyway, thank you, Stacey. Do let me know what you think if you want to come back. Right, Bruce, nod of approval from Bruce. Excellent, thank you. Right. Right, Bruce should remember the SNP started with very few MPs, very little support in Scotland. Absolutely correct. The same with other small parties as well. I mean, the SNP has become influential through the Scottish Parliament, mainly through the proportional representation system. The other examples of small parties making an impact, there's the Scottish Green Party, who again started from nothing, eventually got a couple of MSPs in, they're never off the telly, before you know it, they're running the country. That's an example. And the other example is UKIP, who got virtually no one elected into the Parliament, but their threat was enough to shift the Conservative Party to have a Brexit referendum, and basically UKIP achieved what it was set up to achieve, not by getting elected, but by being a pressure from the outside. But within Scotland, the opportunity for small parties is to actually get elected. So, yeah, good point. All right, Bruce. Socially conservative values, which do stem from biblical teachings, at least in your case. Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, they do flow from biblical teachings, but also from an understanding of the evidence as well. Social conservatism is synonymous with Christianity. Now, I disagree with that. Social conservatism is probably the majority view around the world. Sometimes it's from people who are Muslims or Hindus or all sorts of other things as well. I mean, generally, it's been sort of the default set of values of the human race through human history to some degree. So I wouldn't agree it's synonymous with Christianity. Traditional values in Scotland stem from the Bible. I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, much social conservatism in Scotland does have a specifically Christian origin because of the history of Scotland. That is certainly true. I would give you that. Right. Donald. Hello, Donald Ross. You have a brain on your shoulders. Right, thanks. Thanks very much. I assume that was meant as a compliment. All right, Stacey, thank you. Right, binned immediately a green leaflet through the door today. Just on the subject of leaflets, the MSPs get some sort of they get taxpayer money to pay for them to send leaflets to people in their constituencies. And these leaflets, they're not supposed to be party political, but the green one's green, the Labour one's red, etc., etc. And they basically blow their own trumpet. They say what a wonderful job they're doing and what problems they're solving. I mean, it's basically effectively party election material produced at taxpayers' expense. So I think that's something that's well worth looking at. Right, Bruce. Yes, with respect to UKIP, I agree, but the SNP cleverly shifted themselves into the Overton window. The party seems to be doing the complete opposite, alienating on younger. This party seems to be doing the opposite, alienating younger generations, relying on older generations. I would say I don't care what age people support the family party. We've got a spectrum of people. We've got some young people, we've got some older people. Probably the age profile of our membership will be top heavy. I'd be surprised if that's not also the case for, say, Labour, certainly the Conservatives, very much so. Maybe even the SNP as well, I would suggest. So democracy is about representing people's views. It's not about trying to get any particular age or whatever. It's representing people's views. Now, if you look at research, the proportion of people in, say, the over 55 bracket who would broadly agree with family party perspectives is significantly higher than people in, say, the 18 to 34 bracket. But even within the 18 to 34 bracket, there's a good 10 or 15% who still hold socially conservative views. So even in the youngest age groups, there's enough people sharing our values to get us elected and a bit more. Let's put it that way. So that's what the evidence shows. Right. Why do you believe that boys wearing skirts in schools is bad? Okay, right. That's interesting one. Because skirts are regarded as a female item of clothing. In fact, they are a female item of clothing. Okay, that's an arbitrary cultural phenomenon, but it's true. Yeah, if a man wears a skirt, he's dressing up like a woman, basically. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. So if you say to boys, we'd like you to wear a skirt, you're effectively saying to them, we'd like you to dress as a girl. We'd like you to wear something that would mark you out as a girl normally. It's not something that a boy would normally wear. And so I think that's effectively inviting like gender confusion, gender blurring, gender experimentation. And I think that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. I think the healthy thing for young people is for them to be affirmed and clarified in their own sex. So boys are absolutely clear, they're a boy, and they wear boys' clothes, and their future is as a man, and similarly for girls as well. I think that's the ideal. But inviting them to cross-dress, I think, makes it more likely that boys are going to go into a future where gender confusion plays a part. And I think that's very, very unhelpful. And it's very irresponsible of a school to encourage that. But Edinburgh City Council, Labour SNP run, backed up the school in Edinburgh that did that. And they said, basically, there was no problem as long as the boys weren't forced to wear skirts. The Conservatives, were they up in arms? Not as far as I'm aware. I haven't seen any opposition to this from any other political party apart from the Scottish Family Party. Right. Mr. Q. Evening, Mr. Q. Conservatism is not a set of legislative goals like lowering taxes, school choice, or even border security. It's a set of principles or goods. Yes, I think social conservatism is quite alien to a lot of political thinking in Scotland because it's just so far off people's radar. It deals with aspects of life that mainstream politics doesn't even address. So, yes, a set of legislative goals. I mean, there are some aspects of legislation that would advance the cause of social conservatism in terms of, say, promoting marriage. But yeah, right. Okay. Let's have a look. SNP trying to capture all the young folks with free stuff. Yes, I talked about that last week. I think that was certainly part of their electoral strategy. Funny, if you hold a meeting during an election campaign and say, I'll give you a free glass of lemonade at the meeting, come and hear me speak about the Scottish Family Party, that would be illegal. It's called treating. It's like bribing people to come and hear your talk about the party. But if you're the SNP and you say to young people, if you vote for us and we get elected, we'll give you a free laptop. Well, that's fine. That's fine. So glass of lemonade to get people to hear, totally illegal. Offering a laptop, well, that's fine. Right, Conservatives enter the political arena with their eyes wide open, fully aware that these goods are often in tension with one another. Right, okay, I need a bit more detail on that one. Explain a bit more. Oh, you've got some more comments. Let's see. Right, trousers are male clothing. Logically, girls shouldn't wear them. Didn't until approximately 70 years ago. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But now trousers are not an exclusively male item of clothing. At one point in the past they were, but things changed one way or another, and now they're not. Now, if anyone at this stage, let's say we go back to the stage where basically females did not wear trousers. If someone in a school said, right, I'm going to make the girls wear trousers because I know that's boys' clothes, but we think that will be proper equality. We want the girls to dress up in boys' clothes. Then I think that would not be a helpful thing. So during that process of society shifting from trousers being boys' clothes to being sort of unisex, if you like, during that process, I would say there might have been some difficult areas in that, and it might have been unhelpful in some ways. Now we're at the end point, then there's no issue anymore. The same with skirts. If we did go through a process that ended with skirts became unisex, then I think the issue would be diffused. It wouldn't matter anymore. But through that process, I think there could be some harm done. On the other hand, I think gender-specific clothing is very useful in terms of affirming and reinforcing sex identity. Then I think sex-specific clothing is actually a good thing. If a boy wanted to wear a skirt in school of their own free will, would you support that? No, I wouldn't. I would discourage it. If the school had a uniform policy that prevented that, which would probably be a good idea, then yes, that should be enforced. I think that boy should be encouraged and counseled that that's not a good idea. That's not a good road to go down. So discourage that. Part of the reason as well is for the example sets to other boys as well. It's just going to tend to engender gender confusion. Right, I've got lots of comments coming in thick and fast. Like, what have we got here? Right. Okay, with respect to age groups, I know some who used to vote Green, but over the last few years have become more socially conservative. They've not yet voted SFP. Now, that's a very interesting point, because there is significant evidence that the latest generation coming up into adulthood are significantly more socially conservative than their parents from generations above them. There is a bit of a swing taking place there. And that's interesting. I mean, I haven't got the statistics at hand, but even on questions like, do you think the sex before marriage is right or wrong, or homosexuality or whatever, there's a bit of a shift in a conservative direction, which is hard to account for since society is becoming so uniform and the education system is indoctrinating young people into a particular view. But maybe just as the education system squeezes them harder and harder, more get squeezed through the fingers and fall through the gaps or whatever, and end up with different views. So if conservatism is rapidly changing, it ceases to be conserving anything, and it isn't conservatism at all. Yes, that's a good point as well. And I sometimes think that's a problem with the term conservative. I mean, the Scottish Family Party, are we conservatives? Are we trying to keep things the way that they are, or the way they were very recently? I mean, in lots of cases, no, very definitely not. I mean, we're the radicals. We want things to really change extremely dramatically. Like in terms of education, I mean, we're not conservative. We're not wanting to keep things the way they are. We're not wanting to slow down change whatever. We're wanting a complete revolution in there. Yeah. So the word conservative isn't very helpful in some ways. Apparently, it only gets used as a political term in the English-speaking world. In other parts of the world, they don't associate similar sets of views with the idea of conserving something. Maybe because their national histories are different. But yeah, that's a good point. Skirts were also unisex. Perhaps in another time, you'll be protesting males wearing trousers, women wearing skirts. Yeah, absolutely. They're just arbitrary social conventions, but they're very real nonetheless. There's still a fact that in Scotland today, a man can dress as a woman. And if you saw him, you'd say he's dressed as a woman. I mean, it's quite clear that would be the case. Like I say, it's socially constructed, absolutely fine, but it's no less real for that. Right. Yeah, I remember that actually. There was a bit of a trend, wasn't there? David Beckham trying to get male skirts on the go, but it didn't quite work out. Now, here's an interesting one. Gender and sex are completely different things. Right. Now, I think this whole idea of gender and sex being different, it's just a total tangle of contradictions. It's a complete muddle, and it doesn't make sense. But I will try to explain what I believe. Right. We know what we mean by sex. Okay. Sex is a biological thing. And as far as I'm concerned, it can't be changed. It's written into every cell of your body and the DNA of every cell of your body. Sex cannot be changed. So there's males and females. Okay, there's a tiny proportion with intersex conditions, but basically there's males and females. That's sex. Now, what people now say is gender is to do with how people feel, whether they feel masculine or feminine, whether they feel male or female, whether they feel to be a man or a woman. Now, I would say those feelings do not change what someone is. So through these subjective feelings, a person cannot actually become, for example, a man becomes a woman because he feels like he is. So a man who feels that he's really a woman is mistaken. It's not that he's discovered his gender identity, it's that he's mistaken. He's confused. He's faced a psychological problem. So I understand what you mean by gender and sex, but I disagree with the idea that selecting a gender identity that's independent of sex is a positive thing to do. I feel it's a negative thing to do. And the whole idea that this is an option for people, I think is very destructive and it's causing mayhem in our society and it's harming a lot of people, especially young people. I suspect you might disagree. So come back to me. Let's see what you've got to say. Some people may be waking up to the international Marxist totalitarian agenda of the main parties. Right, internationalism. Let's go through those one at a time. Internationalism. That's the belief that like supranational bodies should grow in importance. Nations should recede in importance, and there should be more cooperation and joint government, etc., across national boundaries. That's internationalism. I would say the SNP, in some ways, is quite internationalist. I mean, it's a bit strange that a nationalist movement can be internationalist, but I'd say it is. The Lib Dems, generally people on the left of politics, tend to be internationalists. And if you go to the very far left, to some Marxism, then yeah, the idea is you want a world government, world revolutionary socialist government, and that's the ideal future. That's the utopian vision of the future where nation states are no more. So in terms of internationalism in that sense, yeah, parties of the left are more internationalist. The Conservative Party in Britain, where are they? Well, I would say they're sort of somewhere in the middle. Then if you go to parties further to the right, you tend to find a more bigger emphasis on nationalism, on the value and place of nation states. So in Scotland, the Scottish Conservatives, I would say, were not really nationalist. They are more towards the internationalist frame of mind as well. Now, Marxist, I'm reluctant to use the term Marxist in a loose way. In terms of social issues, a lot of the things you can hear said in the Scottish Parliament are absolutely in line with what Stalin and Lenin and Engels or whatever said, the fathers of communism. So that there's a lot that gets said that is in line with Marxist teaching. Also, I think Marxism is alive and well within academia. Okay, there are no academics really in Britain who are fascists. I mean, they just don't exist. But there are plenty who would self-identify as Marxists. So Marxism is a live option for people. It is a living movement, if you like, in Britain and in Scotland, and it does have a substantial number of adherents. Are they in the Scottish Parliament? Well, the Green Party, I mean, I'd love to hear them pinned down. People like Ross Greer and Patrick Harvey, are they Marxists? Well, maybe not too far off. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear them put on the spot. I mean, the SNP, I wouldn't say they're Marxist. I mean, they're more centre-left in terms of economic policy. Totalitarian. Now, after the parties in the Scottish Parliament, I would fear the Green Party in government. I think the restrictions on our freedoms could be pretty severe. If you didn't agree with them, then you find yourself in trouble in all sorts of ways. Then the SNP, not quite so bad, but they're still in that direction. I mean, they've got the one true truth. And if you disagree, you really deserve what you've got coming. That tends to be their philosophy. I mean, the current Scottish government, were they described as totalitarian? Definitely not. It's still a functioning democracy. Human rights are still sort of more or less upheld. I know that there's the lockdown issues where I think the government faces difficult decisions. Have they gone too far in terms of restricting freedoms and undermining rights? I believe that they have. But I don't believe that that's been part of a sort of sinister, wider plan to suppress the population and bring in totalitarianism. I believe it's an overly fearful response to a genuine problem. Right, let's see. Tell me you haven't read Marx without telling me you haven't read Marx. If you think this country is totalitarian, it's an insult to those who are actually existing in tyranny. I would tend to agree with that comment at the end. Yeah, I think there are some people who are too willing to say we're in a tyrannical dictatorship. I mean, it's just not true. It's not true. I mean, go to North Korea or whatever, you'd see those. Which direction is the SNP pulling us in? It is pulling in a more authoritarian direction. And I think the freedoms for people who disagree with them are being squeezed in various ways. But I wouldn't say that was totalitarianism. Would I say that people are persecuted for their unorthodox beliefs in Scotland? I would say that they are. I mean, lots of people have had their jobs threatened or taken away because they think or say the wrong things. So I would say that is persecution. Yeah, it's not like being shot, but I would still say that's a form of persecution. Right. Gender is based on the roles that those people play in society. If they want to change their gender, then they should be able to do so freely. The role you play in a society. So in other words, if a man decides that the role he wants to play in society is a woman, then he should be able to choose to do that. But I would say, as a man, you can't choose to play the role of a woman because you're not one. If you choose to do that, if you genuinely believe you're a woman, that's a delusional belief. If you're trying to convince people that you're a woman, then that's a deceptive activity. You're trying to deceive people. So I just don't think they're helpful things. So again, it's this idea that gender identity can be chosen. Basically, that whole idea is unhelpful. It has a negative impact on people. People need to accept their identity is based in their sex, and there's no way around that. And coming to terms with that, coming to accept that, is the way forward. Go into more detail about what's said in the Scottish Parliament, the lines of what Lenin and Stalin said. Okay, the first thing that springs to mind with that is basically the feminists, because the early communists were absolutely firm in their opinion that to liberate women from the oppression of motherhood and homemaking, they had to enter the workforce. And women were oppressed until they were laboring in the factories alongside the men. And you hear basically exactly the same idea dominates in the Scottish Parliament, including from the Conservatives, and the UK government as well, including from the Conservatives. That's what they believe. The liberating women means getting them out to work, and oppressing women means women choosing to be at home nurturing their own children. So that's a prime example. Right, let's have a look. We've got Bruce back here. The claim gender is societal, therefore can change at will. That's a bit iffy in my opinion. Anything is societal. Age, race, height, all of these were measured, created by society. Can they be changed? Now I would say those things you see are not created by society. Ultimately, I mean, if you're 27 years old, it's not that society's decided you're 27 years old. You actually are. That's how many times the Earth's been around the sun since you were born. If you're of a certain race, again, that's to do with your genetic inheritance. That's not socially constructed. If you're a certain height, okay, the units it's measured in might have been created by that society, but the actual thing they're measuring was not created by the society, so they can't be changed. But the analogy is helpful, though, because you do get people who say, you know, I choose to identify as a different race. I choose to identify as a different age as well. But in those contexts, currently, it sounds completely ridiculous to do that. But not too long ago, it seemed completely ridiculous to do that with regard to sex as well. But things have changed. So, yeah, good point. Right, Bruce, yeah, I realized that. That's fine. They should not, never try to teach the transgender stuff in schools. It's wrong. It certainly is. I mean, I find it bizarre that such a set of beliefs can just become part of the curriculum in virtually every school in Scotland. It's just remarkable that a group can have such power to do that. I mean, I don't think it's even the majority opinion within adults in Scotland, and yet it's just taken over the education system completely. Right, John, do you think that one of the goals of banning so-called conversion therapy to make sure the number of homosexuals is not depleted? I would say no. I don't think that's part of it. I think the thing with conversion therapy, to clarify if you're not familiar with the idea, the UK government is heading towards banning therapies designed to change someone's sexuality or gender identity. The UK is doing it. Scotland is also going down the same path, but Scotland is a bit behind. What I expect to happen is the UK will come up with some law that's completely unnecessary and will be a restriction on freedoms that's wrong, basically. But then I think Scotland will come along and come up with a law that's even worse. That's my prediction. So why are they doing it? What do they want? I think it's driven by sort of LGBT activists who can't stand the idea that there are people in society who think, for example, that being homosexual is undesirable, or being in a homosexual relationship is less desirable than being in a heterosexual relationship, that somehow it's inferior, it's not ideal, however they might want to put it. Now, they're really enraged that there are people that think that. And so they hate the idea that they might have to encounter that view. So if someone, even if you've got someone, say, who's developing a man developing sexual attraction to men who doesn't want that, let's say he wants to stay with his wife, wants to maintain a heterosexual relationship. So he wants to suppress or to eliminate homosexual attraction. If that person finds a counselor who says, yes, I agree with you, you're doing the right thing. The right thing is to try and suppress these homosexual desires and to stay with your wife. So I think you're doing the right thing. I'd like to help you with that. So we can meet up and talk about that every week. Now, I think in Scotland, within a couple of years, that will be illegal for those conversations to take place, even though the person is seeking them and they agree with the person counseling them that the change would be a good thing. But I think it will be banned. And I say the reason behind it is activists who just can't bear that anyone is allowed to communicate the view that they think that a homosexual relationship is in might be, for some people, undesirable or less than ideal. So they want to try and crush it. Right, when we'll be in around Glasgow, there's no Glasgow meetings scheduled for the moment. There might well be something before Christmas, I'm not sure, but certainly in January there will be a meeting in Glasgow, so it'll be nice to see you, Michael. If the SFP became empowered as a majority government in Parliament, which single issue would be your primary foremost focus? Right, the Scottish Family Party is not geared to become the government. We're geared towards being a unique voice in the Scottish Parliament, to move on debate, to bring different issues up the political agenda, and to start shifting public opinion. That's our goal for the foreseeable future. Now, if it got to the stage where the Scottish Family Party was in with a chance of becoming the government, then we would have to develop, the party would be a lot bigger, and we would develop more detailed policies in a whole range of areas. And when we took over as the government, we'd have policies in place for all of those areas. What would the priority be? Well, I still think promoting healthy family life would be at the core of what we do. The pro-life issue would be at the core of what we do. But that will be among all the other aspects of running the country as well. But that's off in the distant future. For the time being, our vision is to get people elected, to shake up the debates, to open up the debate, and to persuade people more widely within the country of a sort of socially conservative position. Right, what have we got here? The Scottish Parliament don't want to change your agenda. They promote equality, and that if you want to, then you can. As you keep going on about freedom, why would you take it away from them? Right, what freedom am I taking away from anyone? Now, if someone wants to declare themselves as a different gender identity, what do I have to say about that? I think that's unhelpful. It's not a good road to go down. The Family Party policy in terms of legal sex change is that there should be no such thing. Because the thing with legal sex change, if you can fill a form in and get a doctor to sign it or whatever, and then you were a man but you're now a woman, what that means is the rest of society has to play along with it, and they have to treat you as though you're a woman. And we think that's not fair, because there's a lot of people who don't want to do that. And it's not fair that the state should impose on the rest of society that they basically act against their conscience because of one person's decision. So if someone declares themselves to be whatever gender they like, then okay, fine. But as far as the law is concerned, and as far as state institutions are concerned, it hasn't changed their sex. And that's what really matters. That's what's going to be recorded about that person. So if people want to treat the person in that in regard to their sex, then they've got every right to do so. Right, here's a profound one. You're a waste of hair. That's why you're bald. A waste of hair. How am I wasting hair if I'm bald? I think you need to think that through again. There's maybe a good joke in there somewhere, but I think you need to work on it. It's not quite working at the moment. Oh, sorry. Right, freedom to change their gender at will. Now, at the moment, I would say people can change their gender. If someone wants to say, I'm grey-gendered, I'm androgyne or whatever, then they can do. Okay, I think it's very misguided, but people can do that. If they want that recorded as like in place of their sex on official documents, then I would say no. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, people can change their gender at will. Just don't expect anyone else to go along with it and have to affirm it. Right, Bruce, thank you for your answer. With regards to pro-life ideology, which degree of certainty do you feel that you possess that a fetus is in fact a human life straight from the point of conception? I see that as a really clear, logical case, because I value human life. So at what stage does the fetus become human? Well, it's always human. Scientifically, biologically, it's human. What other species would it be? It's human throughout the time. So, it's alive throughout the time as well. It's a growing new life. So I think from conception is the answer to that. Right, Mark, that's why I follow you. I don't support the vast majority of your policies. I'm pro-choice, atheist, etc. But I think it's important for society to think critically about these things. Right, that's good. I mean, we are the party of debate in Scotland. I mean, we try so hard to get people to come onto this live stream to debate. But, I mean, you'd think we were inviting them to a torture chamber. It's really difficult. So, yeah, that's great. We love discussing, and we're glad you're here, listening to what different people have got to say. Will you publish the results of the conference policy voting? We will. I've been extremely busy this week. Well, the few of us have been working away on various things, but I've got the results of the policy feedback from the conference. I'm going to watch your paper like this. I will go through them before too long, and we'll publish the results. Find it scary how much opinions against the norm are suppressed these days. Absolutely. I published a video on YouTube earlier on today. Have a look at that and see some of the things that have gone on. I mean, just to tell you one little stories in this video. This is from a school in Scotland. I won't say where or anything, but a teacher was chatting to some pupils about Doctor Who, and the teacher said, "I don't like Doctor Who anymore now that it's a girl, it's a woman." I mean, Doctor Who was a man. I don't think they should have changed to a woman. So I don't really watch it anymore. So the pupils went off to the head teacher or whoever and complained. And this teacher was hauled before, the senior management to be reprimanded. And they were either recommended or told that they had to go and do some further, equality and diversity training. I mean, can you believe it? But that's Scotland. I mean, that's one story from school, but these sort of stories have been repeated all over society. Right, these comments are great. I mean, what happened to me talking about my book? Well, that's good. I haven't had a chance to talk about it much, which means you just need to buy it. So if you look in the comments, you'll see a link. You could get your own copy. Right, where are we? Why would we not give the transgender the same amount of respect we give to anyone else? If they want to identify as a gender, want to change their sex, why shouldn't we respect that? Now, you were saying to me earlier on that I didn't understand the difference between gender and sex. You're saying they're different things. You're now saying you can change sex. Do you not believe that sex is a biological thing? Is that not what your chromosomes determine? I mean, is it possible to change sex? I don't believe it is possible to change sex. Why don't we treat people with the same amount of respect as everyone else? Now, respecting people is an interesting concept. Now, I would aim to always treat people with respect in terms of acknowledging their human dignity, etc. I wouldn't want to be, insulting or demeaning or whatever. I might be critical. Respect has another meaning as well. If you see someone making very bad decisions and you really think their character is extremely flawed, for example, that might diminish my respect for them. And I think that's perfectly okay. But yeah, respect transgender people. Yeah, treat them well. Treat them with as fellow human beings, of course. And as I said, if someone wants to identify as another gender, that's up to them. I don't think it's a good idea. In fact, I think it's a very harmful idea. But that's up to them. But changing sex is just not possible. Okay, and I don't believe that a person's gender identity overwhelms their sex. I don't think it supplants their sex and determines their identity. I just don't believe that. So where are we there? Right. Okay. Policies on education. Right. Our policies on education are very extensive, and I would invite you to have a look on our website, and you'll see pages and pages of policies on education. So have a look. Let us know what you think. Right. So we've only got 5 minutes left. That's quite a long one. Right, let's have a look at this. Oh, so I've disappeared with this one. Right. School and teachers have no training to guide children to changing their gender. It only messes with the children's minds. My neighbour's 8-year-old daughter came home from school saying she wanted to be a boy. This went on for 8 to 9 months. She wanted her hair, long, lovely hair, shaved off to short back and sides, wore boys' clothes, wanted to change her name. Now she's changed her mind. This all came from what she was told at school. She's now 9 years old and should never have heard about that. I quite agree. This is going on all over Scotland. The thing is, parents normally don't want to talk about it, which is quite understandable. You don't want to, appear on television saying, "Oh, my child had a real problem with gender dysphoria, but it's okay now." You don't want to label your child like that. You don't want to associate them with that. So the families who experience these difficulties and are appalled by the way the schools deal with it, they generally don't want to speak out publicly. But yeah, it's going on all over the place. How do you obtain the quality documents from the conference? Sadly, we missed, but I'd love to leave them. Right, Michael, I'm not sure if you remember. If you're a member of the party, we're in the process of mailing them out to everyone, free of charge. So if you are a member, they're on the way. If you're not a member, join up and they'll be on the way. Otherwise, we've got a price list and you can buy them. Just email contact@scottishfamily.org and we can sort that out with you. But yes, we would certainly want to distribute our literature far and wide. We've given an awful lot out. We gave out a lot and sold an awful lot as well at the conference. So hopefully they're getting into good hands and having an influence. No copy of it, no copy of the book website. Okay, let's just put it in again. Right, it's just having to think about it. I think that should pop up in a minute. Yep, right, that should be on YouTube and Facebook now. Right, love from Malta. Okay, right, okay, good to have you. Hope to move to Scotland one day. The one party I would consider voting for. Excellent. Come and join us. Come and join us. You change sex through surgery. Right, I disagree. I've got 3 minutes. I'll tell you my argument against that. Let's imagine a man, a husband, a father was kidnapped and he was taken away and people performed sex change, so-called surgery on him against his will. And then he was released and he went back to his family. And his wife says to him, "Oh, my husband, I'm glad you're back." And his kids say, "Oh, Dad, it's great to see you back." What would you say to him? Would you say to him, "No, you're wrong. You're not dad anymore. You're not husband anymore. You're a woman"? And he'd say, "Well, I'm not a woman. I've had these things done to me against my will, but I'm not a woman. I'm a man. I always have been and I still am." Would you say to him, "No, you're not. You've had sex change surgery. Your sex has now changed"? Would you say that? So could you answer that question? Type in your answer now. Let's see what you've got to say. If you say no, then that shows that you don't actually think these procedures change someone's sex. So we await your answer, eagerly awaiting. Okay, just put up a yes or no. Right, while we're waiting, John, our new leaflets. Lots of people contributed. John wrote an excellent booklet for us. If you haven't seen our range of literature, you really need to try and see it. If you go to a local meeting, you see some, or say just email us at contact@scottishfamily.org. You could buy some. Right. The person with the name queer, we're still awaiting your response. Has that person changed sex or not? So this man who's saying he's still a man, even though these procedures have been carried out, do you say to him, "No, you're not, you're a woman"? Is that what you say? Time is ticking away. Are we going to have an answer? Right, so we're going to multi-faith party, very definitely. People of all faiths and none. All faiths and none. I would say most of our members are of some sort of religious faith because our values reflect the value systems of a lot of religious traditions. Oh, right, here we are. It would change their sex. Okay. So you're going to say to that man who's saying, "I'm a man," you're going to say, "No, you're not. You're a woman," because these people who kidnap you have performed these procedures on you. So whether you like it or not, you are now a woman. Is that what you'd say to him? Well, I think that's heartless of you, and it's also just wrong. It's not true. That man who says he's a man and always has been a man is still a man. And I think you'd be hard pushed to find many people who would agree with your opinion there. To be honest, I'm not sure you really agree with yourself. I'm not sure that's what you really think. I think maybe you realize you've been backed into a corner and think that's what you had to say in the situation. Right. Interesting, though, it would be to continue that. So I can see that you've carried on the conversation. I won't carry on now because our hour is up. But do come back next week and we could maybe have a further chat. In fact, if you'd like to, I'm talking to Queer with a W. Now, if you would actually like to come on to the live stream one week and discuss this, then we could do that. Send an email to contact@scottishfamily.org and we can see if that's a possibility. Email contact@scottishfamily.org and we can see if maybe one week you could come on and we can have a live debate. I'm sure that would be interesting. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for watching. So much fun we talking about my book. I say too many good questions coming in. So I enjoyed interacting with you this evening. So thanks for being with us tonight. And those of you who are going to watch later, and good night.